Toram Online has quite the history with boss difficulty. There's been bosses in the past that were so difficult that no player in the game was able to beat that boss within their skill set or within the game's mechanics, untouched, solo. But I'm gonna pass this intro for the video off to a dear friend of mine.
Alright campers, I just heard from an anonymous source that someone says Chtholly is the hardest boss in the game.
Not cool, dudes.
That's what I said.
There are only 10 marshmallows on this plate. When I call your name, come up and claim your marshmallow. The camper who does not receive a marshmallow tonight must immediately return to the dock of shame to catch the boat of losers. That means you're out of the contest. And you can't come back. Ever.
Which would make you automatically a fraud of a Toram boss.
Starting things off on this list, I want to start with a boss that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about, and a boss that I hope returns very soon. Considering we're about to get the 10th anniversary, this will be a really good time for this boss to return, with a bit of a spin and maybe an upgrade for the crystal. The boss I'm talking about is Gresia. Gresia is actually a character from Arewzo Online, who is featured in Toram Online in multiple ways. First and foremost, many know her as the boss Imitatia, but she actually got remixed after that part of the story and became her own standalone boss called Gresia. This boss was part of one of the download celebrations, and this was a boss fight featuring 3 characters, Gresia, Mezzaluna, as well as the Queen Toram, and you had to fight all 3 of them at the same time. What made this boss so difficult was just all of the shark fins flying around the screen. You had the lasers, you had the balls, you had the vortexes, you had everything that the game just was throwing at you back then. And back then, you know, we didn't have the evasion or guard system, like we didn't have the ability to manually evade or anything like that. And so the bosses doing stuff like this was just very difficult to deal with. On top of that, this was an arena that you could fall out of. And, you know, you also ran the risk of killing the Queen Toram too fast, where you weren't able to get any of Gresia or Mezzaluna's drops, and you had to kill all 3 of them in order to get all 3 of their drops. Otherwise, you would only get the Queen Toram's drops. So that added another layer of difficulty to this boss for people that wanted to farm. Back at the time, I don't recall if anyone has ever actually soloed this boss, but for its time, it was definitely the hardest boss the game had ever seen. Gresia, come and get your marshmallow. You don't have to ride the boat of losers. Today at least.
Next on the list, we have Dune. Go ahead and explain for them, would ya?
Okay, so Dune was just one of those bosses that was just absurd for its time. I mean, literally, you couldn't attack the boss. There was just literally, there were shark fins, there were spikes everywhere. This was like, for its time, literally the exact thing that Black Lixie is right now. And, you know, Black Lixie is not as bad because you have the guard and evasion system. This, again, this boss was just a product of its time. Like, for its time, it was just too much. You couldn't, you know, manually guard or manually evade, and so you had to pretty much just face tank and deal with everything. And then some of the attacks just came out so fast that there was just no way to possibly deal with them. It was just a lot, man. Like, honestly. So, you know, Dune can get a marshmallow too, yeah.
Narrowly dodged an elimination.
And speaking of narrowly dodging eliminations, the next boss on this list will actually be the Grass Dragon Yelp. Now this boss, the pattern wasn't anything crazy. It was just another boss where it's just kind of like, you had the global AoE situation. And then this is one of Toram Online's first high defense bosses ever. And at the time, we did not have physical or magic pierce. And so this boss would take upwards of, you know, 10 to 20 minutes to kill if you were not an experienced player with high damage. You basically had to be playing one of the meta classes or a armor break class to actually deal with this boss. Again, the pattern wasn't hard. And, you know, nothing about this boss was hard except for actually killing it. And it just basically became a slugfest of endurance. And so, you know, odds were you died before you were able to kill the boss. And then, you know, obviously this boss got power crept as, you know, power creep happened in the game, and it became quite a joke to kill this boss, especially after we got physical and magic pierce. But for its time, this boss was outrageous, man.
Not quite as outrageous as the next boss, bro.
Yeah, basically, so the next boss is Gresia. This boss is actually the newest boss in the game as we speak. Well, as this video is being made at least. And this boss is just very, very ridiculous. Everything you could think of in a boss is present here. You have your critical hit auto attacks, you have your fractional shark fins, you also have magic shark fins, you have physical shark fins, you have fractional tornadoes, you have mana explosion, you have every single thing. You have dash spams, and you have your gank squad. You're getting jumped in this boss. So yeah, this boss sounds absolutely outrageous because it is. Yeah, the only way to beat this boss is by cheesing it, and there's not a lot of ways to really cheese this boss other than making an anti-fractional build, and in which case you still have to deal with the fractional well, not the fractional, but critical hit auto attacks. So now you basically have to build an immortal build, and there's only 2 classes in the game that can reliably make this build. So yes, Gresia is a boss that might make you pull out your hair.
I quite literally threw my phone like Dickles during 7th anniversary.
And we have another relatively new boss for our next boss. Coming at number 6 will be Black Lixie. Again, this boss, it's basically just Gresia, but the fractionals are toned down. You know, it's not as bad, and you have a lot more opportunities to attack this boss. You don't have to cheese this boss. I mean, all the solos are pretty much cheesing this boss, but we're not going to really get into that. But this boss, what makes this boss number 6 and not number 7 like Gresia is the fact that a lot of the attacks actually aren't fractional, so you have to actually just have raw defense, and it just makes it a little bit harder to, you know, deal with this boss in general. Again, you got the gank squad, you're getting jumped. It's pretty bad, but you know, it's a little bit easier to handle than Gresia, but it's also simultaneously harder to handle than Gresia. So you pick your poison, I guess.
This next boss has more remakes than Pokemon games.
Yeah, the next boss is Pedro, and this boss also, you know, the reason why this boss is higher than a lot of these other bosses isn't because of the boss itself, but it's a victim of the time that the boss came out.
Literally cannot make this up. The game totally had the worst set of bugs known in the history of gaming.
You had your teleport bugs, you had just the boss skipping its own pattern, you had the aggro switching randomly and making the boss freeze. You also just had an abusable bug that just made the boss freeze intentionally too, because of the regretless bug, if anyone remembers that. Yeah, this boss was so hard that people were cheesing the boss with a bug. And what made the boss hard was a bug, and people were getting banned for using a bug to defeat a bug. Like, this boss transcended the design of the boss. It was just that annoying. And, you know, also, this boss was easier solo than it was in parties, which kind of goes against the making of this list, but who cares? Who cares? Pedro gets a marshmallow, man. This next boss left a couple of my friends pretty banged up.
Would you look at that? They're not dead.
Yeah, but they're probably all banged up, you know? The kind you never really heal from. Maybe I should call for help.
The next boss is Guard Golem. This boss was just so ridiculous. Like, the only classes that could solo this boss were classes that had Paralyze or classes that just had infinite evasion. So this was before we had the new dagger skills and the assault chase skill, which basically gives you infinite evasion. And this was also before we had infinite iframe stacking on Katana. Which is kind of redundant because Katana was still the only class that was able to really solo this boss, and it kind of made me not like Katana. So this boss goes double, man. This boss is just absolutely killing it on this list right now. Guard Golem gets a marshmallow like 100%. This boss was just ridiculous. You had the auto attack spam, He literally could do 20 auto attacks in a row if he really, really wanted to. If you got that unlucky, he could. I was watching Zen solo and Discord, man, this boss just would not stop auto attacking. And I knew in my heart that Zen was gonna give up when he got really quiet. And I just heard him get quiet for like 20 minutes. And then he came back and said that he beat the boss. And I was really impressed. But this boss was ridiculous, man, if it had Zen sweating in his chair like that.
Okay, new intern. I know it's weird that you're starting on our last show, but all of the other interns died already.
And the next boss on the list is York. This boss was the boss that was released a day after Katana got announced, if I recall correctly. And this boss actually was part of a relatively big update. It's actually still my favorite boss to this day, but what made this boss so difficult was it was one of the first bosses to feature a really split second iframe. You know, like the ones that Pistius does that no one talks about. Literally, why have a attack warning if there's no literal way that you can dodge this attack? But yeah, pretty much this AoE was literally just a attack that was a retaliation to the boss meeting a certain amount of HP. And you know, it gave you slowness, and it also could just kill you if you got caught off guard. It was like the triple donut AoEs that Piscruva has, but like, you know, toned up for the time because we didn't have the manual guard or evasion again. So it was just kind of another victim of, you know, when it was released, and that's what made this boss so difficult. I remember a lot of people just like built semi-tanks for this boss because it was just impossible to, you know, burst this boss with DPS. And then you also had the sleep AoE at the very end, and he put you to sleep for like 5 to 10 seconds. And it basically became a damage check at that point. You had to kill the boss or he one-shot you. So yeah, that's kind of what made this boss very interesting. And very difficult for its time. So yeah, York's number 3.
You know what I see here? I see a very undisciplined group. I see a disgraceful mess. I see...
Boss Rogue is number 2. Everyone knew that this boss was going to be on the list. Everyone that's played the game as long as I have knew about this boss. Everyone that's played Toram Online from the beginning. Everyone that even knows the history of the hardest bosses in this game know about this boss. This boss... Literally, if this boss was remade right now with modern boss stats, it would be the hardest boss in the game. Think about that. No boss in history can really be remade right now and, you know, have that status. So, you know, it's on the list.
All you have to do is test out this final challenge and make sure it's moderately safe.
Safe enough, man. So, number 1 on this list, everyone knows it. Process of elimination. It's Boss Colon. No, not that Boss Colon. This Boss Colon. Yeah, Boss Colon, the only way to beat this boss is by running around in circles for 7 hours, and no one has that type of time, and no one has that type of patience. Actually, there is someone with that type of patience and time. Anyways, yeah, if you try to just face this boss head on like it's a normal Toram Online boss, you will get every single bit of your life handed to you. All in one moment. Like, there's just no way to survive any attacks from this boss. You could have the tankiest, like, character ever, and you will still get one-shotted. So, yeah. Also, what makes it funny is that tanks have to literally run around in circles. And now they run the risk of losing aggro by doing that. So, yeah, this boss is kind of ridiculous. And, yeah. So, we've made it to the end of the video. And these are the campers that have marshmallows. Anyone that's not on the list has to walk the dock of shame to the boat of losers, and they automatically lose the challenge. So yes, all of the remakes of Pedro are automatically disqualified. You cannot return. Ever. And the 7th anniversary arena bosses automatically disqualified as well. So yes, it's quite embarrassing that Dickles broke his phone fighting that boss. What do you guys think about this list? I had a lot of fun making this video, and I hope you guys had a lot of fun watching it. I typically, you know, don't make these types of videos, at least not very often. And I just figured I would kind of, you know, throw some filler content in for you guys to watch while we are, in this last run for the anniversary for Toram Online. What are you guys' top 10 hardest bosses in Toram Online's history? Please let me know in the comments below. And you guys make sure that you praise God and have a wonderful day.